Hello. You are listening to the Carroll Connection with your host, Jared Carroll.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Carroll Connection. I'm your host, Jared Carroll, here to bring you guys another great episode. Did want to take a chance to shout out last week's episode 133 with Joshua Wees. He is a real estate agent as well as a tech sales guy. And on that episode, we talked about why he got into real estate. We talked about his journey through playing like sports and soccer, making friends and learning some life lessons through that, which helped him later into like college, and then why he got into real estate and wanted to make money. It was a really great episode. You can check that out at thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you'd like to watch your podcast, you can go on YouTube, search The Carroll Connection, or at Jared M. Carroll. Should pop up right for you. And if you want to be a guest or return as a guest, you could hit me up on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll or at The Carroll Connection, and or text, snap, however you want to reach me. Also, for people listening right now, new merch. If you want free merch, come be a guest in the podcast. And if you want the merch, hit me up and we can figure out some details around that. I prefer to kind of gift it as a present for people that come on the podcast. So if you want a cool shirt, I got the tie-dye ones. I have 2 designs posted on my Instagram. Hit me up and we could talk about that. But today, bringing in another great guest for episode 134, Aram.
Hello.
Pronounce your last name for us.
Diarbian.
And we said that was Arabic, correct? Yep. Cool. And I just didn't want to butcher it, guys, so I wanted to just at least say the first name and then
yeah, it's hard to say, but
yeah. And I get embarrassed. Honestly, have to like re-record if I mess up the last name.
yeah.
But I also want it to be out there so like people put a face to a name. For every podcast, I like to talk about kind of like who you are and what you're doing currently. So I'll allow you to kind of dive into that.
Okay. So my name is Aram Diarbian. I'm 20 years old. I'm a student at Rhode Island College, and I pursue art. And that's about it.
Perfect. And we'll dive into the art like kind of later in the podcast, and you guys are in for a treat. This is some fantastic art. It's really some dope shit. It's really cool. I like to start off the podcast talking about family dynamic. And for the listeners, I like to explain why for any new listeners, because we're talking about your life story here. So I like to kind of paint a whole picture. And I believe that like, if we're going to kind of like analogy here, but like when you're building a house, you want to build a solid foundation.
Exactly.
And if we talk about your family and your upbringing, it allows people to understand where you're coming from. And obviously whatever you're comfortable with, but I'll allow you to kind of take the floor with that.
Okay. So I have a twin brother.
Oh, really? That's dope.
But we're fraternal, so we don't look alike.
Okay.
And my parents are still together. Never divorced, nothing like that. And yeah, that's about it. I mean, twin brother. It was cool, growing up, same age and everything. So
that's really interesting. I think I've maybe interviewed. I can't remember off the top of my head, but how was that like growing up, like sharing everything? Probably.
So my mom, she liked matching us in clothes and doing all that, even though we weren't identical. But yeah, I mean, we would be like in the same classes together sometimes, just having someone there that's the same age as you growing up, you can relate to things better. And I don't know, it was cool.
Yeah. I think having a sibling to grow up with, like, luckily you're same age, you're twins.
Yeah,
so like, that's actually really cool. Like my brother is, so I have 3 brothers, but one of my youngest is like about like a little bit of like a year-ish, a little bit more, but to be able to have that relationship and to grow with him and to play sports with him, and your siblings are your first friends, really. So like to have that, to grow up with someone, also to share all those experiences, that definitely sounds like it was probably an interesting experience.
Yeah, I mean, at first we didn't get along too well. Like when we were little kids, we'd fight over everything, and I was a little troublemaker. I harassed him a little bit, but now we get along. I mean, we don't fight or anything. We're kind of just civil with each other.
Yeah. That sounds like a typical sibling relationship, to be honest, is to like struggle through that and like to have those battles. And then as you grow up, you get closer. And like, that's what happened to, not always like super closer, but like it becomes less of the fighting basically. And it's like, I remember me and my brother, we used to fucking honestly beat the shit out of each other.
Yeah,
We'd
no.
always go at it. It was just like kind of just like a brotherly thing to do, and just
Hmm.
like I don't know, it's get on your nerves, you fight it out, and I think to a certain degree, it was kind of healthy in a certain way to like have that boundary. It's like you say some stupid shit, you're gonna get hit,
Exactly. Yeah.
and like it was like teaching real life lessons that kind of aren't really taught anymore. To be
Hmm.
honest, is
Yep.
like everyone behind hiding behind screens and like not knowing that there's consequences and repercussions to things that you actually say.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the cool things about having a sibling is to have those lessons taught to you because like your siblings kind of get a free pass to swing if they need to,
Yep.
and being as a twin, like there's no really. Are you the older one
No,
or
he's older by a minute.
5 minutes?
Yeah, yeah.
Does he hold that
Oh,
against you?
yep, yep.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I feel
Hmm.
like twins usually do that, so
Yeah.
that's an interesting dynamic.
Hmm.
But I want to start transitioning a little bit too. Growing up, like, were there any sports or were there any hobbies that you did to kind of like be able to make friends, like outside of like your brother?
So I was never really into sports. I did play. I played rec basketball. There was like a league. Um, but I never did that like seriously. It wasn't kind of just like it was kind of just a thing I did, just a hobby. Um, but to make friends, uh, I mean, I was pretty introverted during school. I had a small friend group, and it wasn't really through like any hobbies or anything. It was kind of just people I met.
Yeah, that makes sense. And
Yeah.
um, did you just not enjoy like sports in general? It just never really
Yeah,
caught your
I
eye.
I I and I tried, basketball, baseball, all of them except for football, but, it's just none of them really stuck to me. I wasn't really a big sports person. I still am just not really.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it now, quite frankly, I agree with some people that do say that sports are a waste of time. Like I'm like half in, half out. Growing up playing sports, I love them obviously, but
Yeah.
like there is a point where it's just entertainment, and like obviously, if you're trying to pursue something, if you're just entertaining yourself, are you really pursuing it?
Yeah.
So like there is that part where it's like sometimes sports become too much of an indulgence, and like now that people are talking about gambling in Massachusetts, that opens up a whole nother door for
Exactly.
sports, and like there are a lot of negative cultures associated with sports where it's aren't always positive.
Mhm.
And that's something that we don't talk about too, and like it's interesting to hear from someone who just didn't really enjoy sports like that and weren't really interested,
Yeah.
because it opens up like a whole nother conversation, which leads into my question about you being an artist basically. Like how did that kind of develop? Did it develop while you were a child?
So yeah, I've always been into art. I remember like my mom when I was just a little kid, like a toddler, she would set up a piece of paper in front of me and I would just draw on it with a crayon. And I always enjoyed it. I always enjoyed being able to put my creativity into something that's physical. You know what I mean? Um, so it's just something that naturally came to me, and I've always kind of just stuck to it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and like that's something that it's kind of one of those things like you can learn how to be an artist kind of,
Yeah,
but
yeah, you
like
can. You definitely can.
but I think there is some innate thing there too. And like
Hmm.
did you feel like you always just kind of had it?
Yeah, I think it comes with like if you have like a creative mindset, you can kind of just come up with things. And I think it's easier for me to do that than like the average person trying to draw. And I think that plays into it. But like I definitely think you can practice and get very good without like that, innate talent.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. Is like at a certain point they always say like the hard work will beat the talent. So like if you're not actively like working hard at your craft,
Exactly.
like someone who might not be as talented as you
Hmm.
can eventually pass you. And I think especially in the creative aspect, that I mean you see it all the time with people who are creators, is like someone who is naturally gifted at something might start slacking off because they just, hey, I just what I do, I'm just good at it, and then someone who wants it more than they do will come along and just kind of take it.
Hmm.
And what specifically with art, was it always just drawing that kind of initially got you into it? Was it maybe
Yeah.
painting? Like what was it for you?
So I always knew I was creative in some sort. But so I always did art like traditionally, like the traditional kind of art. So I think I started a lot with drawing. That's what really got me into it, and just sketching. Like I'd be in class just drawing in like a notebook and not really paying attention. And then I kind of got into painting, and it. I took a lot of art classes like in high school. Like whenever I could take an art class, I that's what I did. And so uh, it was definitely drawing. I think drawing was it.
What did you specifically? Was it like drawing like people? Was it drawing
Um,
places? Like like was it anything?
there was a point in time where I was obsessed with like drawing eyes, and I would try and draw them as detailed as I can. And I think that's what I did for like a whole year. I was just so fascinated by like an eye, just drawing an eye. So,
Are you going to school for something artistic or?
yeah. So, I'm an art major, but I'm trying to be a graphic designer.
Okay,
So,
we'll dive into that
yeah,
later. I
yeah,
don't
yeah,
want to
yeah.
like jump the gun, but I was
Exactly.
just
Yeah, yeah.
curious, like thinking off the top of my
Uh huh.
head. Um, I want to talk a little bit too, diving into going into kind of like senior year and stuff, and we were talking off podcasts how your graduating year was COVID year,
Yeah.
correct? So that's a very interesting year, and I've talked to David and
Mhm.
Zach and stuff, and I've talked to them and heard their perspectives on it. But I'm interested to hear your perspective and kind of like what you went through at that time. Um, Being an introverted person and myself, I could probably
Mhm.
relate, and it was probably somewhat of a fun time for you
Yeah.
to be able to kind of be not almost like locked away, but like we were allowed to like kind of tap into that, excuse me, that creative aspect and like really kind of like work on the craft. And as someone who's an artist, that probably really allowed you the time to
Oh,
do that.
yeah.
So, but I'm interested to know the schooling part and like what that experience was like for you.
Yeah, it was weird because we didn't really know it was gonna happen. So we knew COVID was a thing, right? But we were in school and we were just like, okay, let's just wash down these tables just in case. And the week after, we're like, okay, they're like, oh, there's no school, right? So we didn't know that was gonna be our last week of actual in person school. And so weeks go by and they start making everything online. And like I personally, I didn't like the online classes. I don't work well online. And it sucks because my first year of college was like that. So I wasn't a fan of it. I mean, I still did the work and everything, but the online classes just it wasn't really, in my opinion, the best way to keep continuing the schooling at home. But I mean, we missed out. I think we missed out on our senior prom, but I went to my junior one. So, uh, but yeah, it was definitely interesting.
Yeah, that was kind of like the similar story that I was hearing from Zach and David was kind of just the same of just like they almost like didn't mind it
Yeah.
and like I think that was probably a pretty shared experience with a lot of like kids, especially in high school at that time,
Mhm.
especially if it's like your senior year. You're like, I remember that being like the time of my life where it was kind of just classes weren't as important,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it was kind of just like you wanted to just get the thing done. So like you kind of had like a shortened year basically, obviously with COVID and like online classes aren't like weren't probably as graded as harshly as they would have been in person.
Yeah, exactly.
So like that is kind of like a unique experience and like you definitely can see the repercussions of that though, like especially with the kids starting to really come out now and like having gone through that experience, like at least you were able to like experience high school enough to like get that
Mhm.
because like usually around senior year it's kind of like I just want to get the fuck out of here
Yep.
basically.
Mhm.
So like what was that like transition like now that like your senior year, you're kind of like it's like everyone's favorite question, right? Is why go to college? Like, and what was that experience like? Have trying to like figure out where to go to school with COVID being a thing. I can imagine that being
Yeah.
difficult.
So, when I first graduated, I didn't know what I wanted to do yet. I knew I had the art, in the back, but I I was I was really confused on what I want to do, and I've always been like good with computers, so I thought, okay, maybe I'll go down that route. But I was always iffy about that, and I didn't really realize what I wanted to do until I think the beginning of this year. I didn't realize I want to be a graphic designer, but I kind of took the computer aspect and the art aspect and kind of merged them together. Um, but yeah, I mean the first couple years were just interesting because I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was just taking all my gen eds. I started out at CCRI, which I I wouldn't I would definitely do that again because it's cheap. It was so cheap. The classes were easy, and I mean I recommend community college to everyone that starts college, especially if you don't know what you want to do yet. It's a great way to start. Um, but yeah, that's what I did.
100%. And like I've said that multiple times in this podcast is
Hmm.
like for people that might be in that position that maybe just listening, like community college is a fantastic place to start,
Exactly.
especially when you don't know, because you're gonna save so much money and you get the same degree in
Oh,
4 years. Like you just transfer it to a school, usually it's usually local.
mhm,
Like it's the same piece of paper at the end, and like you save a ton of fucking money, and that's something that I wish I did in hindsight.
mhm.
Um, I don't like regret my experience at. I went to UMass Dartmouth. I don't regret the experience, but it would have definitely financially put me in a little bit of a better
Yeah, for
position.
sure.
Like I'm not in like that bad of a position to be honest, but like being in the accounting finance, I know how to manage myself
Mhm.
fairly decently. If I didn't, I'd be a pretty shitty accountant.
Yeah.
But the relationships were uh, nice to have that experience living in college. Did you ever feel like you might be missing out between COVID and like community college?
Um, what do you mean? Like,
Missing out on like the quote unquote college experience, like living in the
see,
dorms,
it's
like the
like
parties. Like,
that
did you think you were gonna miss that?
that was never like exciting for me. I didn't I even now, like I wouldn't really want to live on campus. I wouldn't do want to do that. You know what I mean? I feel like that'd be just like a, a bad influence going out and partying and all that. I like being in my house, like focusing on my craft and kind of just locking in, you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. I totally would actually agree with that. It's
Yeah.
been something like I got that experience and like I was like, I don't like this at
I
all.
know.
And I was like, one of those things that like it's encouraged and like I wonder if that like that narrative has changed in the high school since I graduated in 2014.
Oh, okay.
So I'm wondering, like, was there still that push for like you got to go to a 4 year school? Was that still there?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I knew for a while I want to start like a 2 year. Um, but definitely, yeah.
Yeah, that's like the one thing. That's why I like to have this
Mhm.
conversation, and it's nice to have with people who are younger than me now, is to like
Mhm.
to know if that has like changed and like
Mhm.
they didn't like. And like I appreciate CCON for being a school that like pushed college, like that's like a good thing. You want to be a college prep school, but to not have really like out there the other alternatives, like to really be like, hey, community college, you could save like a ton of money. Like
For
they're
sure.
just like, no, like 4 year schools, like this is the way you want to go because. And I get their perspective as a school, like, you have more kids enrolling to colleges, it looks better for you, you get more funding, like, and,
Mhm.
like, I get the business side of school, like, I understand that, but at, like, 17, 18, 19 years old for a lot of kids, like, making that decision is, like, one of the hardest things to do, and it's like, we're asking people what they wanna do for the rest of their lives, and, like,
Exactly,
you get
yeah.
locked into these giant loans that can they're pretty predatory in the fact that, like, if you don't understand like loans and interest rates and like how they work, and I specifically work with them now.
Mhm.
Like, if you don't understand that, those things will eat you up, and it's not something you can bankrupt on either. Like those will follow you forever.
Yeah.
So it's like we're asking kids basically to make decisions with huge financial impacts, and we're also in a culture that is really pushing do what you love.
Mhm.
And it can be very dangerous and misleading for a lot of people because if they go down the wrong path, you can get really fucked up
Yeah.
and like they end up with a degree that's quite frankly could be useless.
And that was my biggest fear at first because I was so iffy on the computer side of it. Like so like trying to make that decision like right out of high school, it was like, it was kind of terrifying at first. Cuz like I actually had no idea, and even in high school like I didn't really think about that. Like I wasn't really thinking forward. But
I think that's the difference with this generation compared to what our parents went through is like
mhm.
they didn't grow up with the internet and social media.
Mhm.
So it's hard for them to give us advice on how to live these days because the world is a completely different place with the internet and like social media and like what's portrayed online, like the fact that you could make full on careers on the internet, that wasn't a thing for them. They didn't have
Mhm.
that opportunity. So it's like and that's like one thing is like I can imagine too in your family they probably wanted to like chase the career, make the money, support, like you they want you to be successful. They
Exactly.
don't want to see you struggle and go through like those things. But what can be difficult on the backside is like you don't want to end up in the stereotypical 9 to 5 doing something that you fucking
Mhm.
hate.
Oh, yeah, and that's something I do not wanna do, and that's, like if I do anything in life, it's not that. Like, I wanna be the kid that branches out and does their own thing, and I just, like I could not, like, work in an office and be on a computer all day, and that's what the computer stuff is, and I didn't realize that. But
And I think you're making the right decision
yeah.
with going towards graphic designing
Mhm.
because obviously even with the art that you're creating right now on social media,
Yeah.
like it's heavily has to do with graphic designing and using the computers and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But everything out there right now is involving some type of graph. I mean, my backdrop, my logo, like everything is involving some type of design and online.
Mhm.
So to have the skill to know like the softwares and stuff to use to learn these things, was that like a big learning curve for you as like an artist? Like I can imagine growing up, you're obviously using like pen, paper, crayons, paint, like things like that,
Yeah.
but transitioning to more like digital art, was that like a hard transition at all?
Um, yeah, definitely, especially Blender. We'll get into that later, but there's so much going on. It's not the same, like, at all. Like, because you kinda get that muscle memory with your hands, you know, like, how to draw this, how to do that. Like, when it's on digital, it's a completely different story. But I think, again, like, with my creativity, it kinda just it helped me a little bit with that. Um, but yeah.
Yeah, did was like with the art basically, that's like 100% your outlet.
Yeah.
Like, was that kind of the place where were you able to like express yourself through your art? And is that how you kind of like do your art? Like kind of what is maybe a little bit of like the purpose behind the art too that you're making?
Um,
And this can kind of be like our segue to kind of start diving into what you're
okay.
doing. And if you want to introduce kind of like your quote unquote, I guess you can say your brand really, like
Yeah.
talk about that.
So, like, my influence?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. We can start diving into the social media stuff right now.
So, um, so for years I was just doing like obviously traditional drawing, painting, stuff like that. And I was scrolling through Instagram one day and I saw this like this artist, right? And it kind of looked like real pictures. And so I was like, what is this? Like is it photography? Like what is it? And I found out it was like CGI, like and they called themselves an artist. And I didn't realize that was like a form of art, right? And so, I was scrolling through and I just kept looking at all these different art pages, like Blender art, like 3D art. And that's what kind of is like, I was like, I want to learn this. I want to, use my creativity to branch out and kind of just figure out this whole thing and then see what I can make out of it.
Yeah, so kind of explain for like as if like I think of like my parents, like our grandparents, or people are a little bit older. Like,
Yeah.
what is like this CGI art? Like, what is this? Like, what is Blender? Like, what are these things?
Yeah. So it's basically, so like when you watch like an animated movie, all the characters, everything in that, they're hand modeled. So everything's modeled from like either a basic cube, like a circle, and it's kind of just that. It's the process of modeling shapes and texturing them in a way to make them look like things in the real world.
That makes sense, and I think I've seen too, like when like movies do like those extra scenes basically, and they're showing like how things are
Yeah.
being made. Has that ever interested you? Is like that something that could
Um.
be a possible path for you in the future?
It's funny because I've dove into that before, the animation part, and I'm actually doing that more like now in my videos. Um, But yeah, like rigging people, rigging characters, moving like all different parts of the body. I think that's cool. But that's probably the most challenging part for me. Like I just kind of introduced myself to that. But yeah, that'd be a cool like job to do in the future, like animation.
Yeah, I definitely could see that with the style of art that you've been creating too on social media and where you're going with it. It's only going to get better. And
Exactly.
like you're so young and like introduced this at such a great time because like I've seen like especially in my life too and probably yours as well how movies and TV shows and even like YouTube videos and stuff have incorporated the CGI, this new art basically and like what always comes to mind is like the movies like Planet of the Apes or something like that where
Yeah.
it's like you got or like Avatar
Hmm.
too where it's like
Oh, that stuff's crazy. Yeah.
that's when like and I think those are good examples for
Hmm.
people to really get the imagery behind it is like
Hmm.
with the art that you're really working on is like stuff that could lead into that.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
I think that is the cool stuff is that people don't realize is that all this artistic like internet stuff like 5-10 years ago is
Hmm.
really influencing culture.
It is, yeah.
And I think that's a cool thing is that you have a chance to really make an imprint in culture. And I think that is like really dope. And that was one of the things when I saw your page, I'm like, this shit's really fucking sweet. And
Hmm.
it's like you can go in so many different directions with this. Like
Hmm.
it's not just like a one size fits all type vibe.
Exactly, yeah.
So with the with diving into this and creating the page, like what made you want to start creating this and posting it?
Okay, so it was when I saw the accounts with all like the art and the 3D art, I decided to make an Instagram just kind of like um posting like all the stuff I made, right? It didn't matter if it was good or bad. I just kind of want to have like a whole portfolio of it just to show my progress and see how good I got. And as it was never to get any attention. Like there was no thought in my mind of having a lot of followers or anything like that. Um, it was kind of just for me. It was just to have a whole portfolio, have a whole Instagram page of just my stuff, and that's kind of how I start.
What's like influenced like because we were talking off podcast and I
Hmm.
wanted to like save some of the like this question for like the podcast so people can listen.
Yeah.
Um because like when I watch it, it's a lot of like not dark, but like more mysterious type vibe to it. At least some of the videos, not all of them, obviously.
Hmm.
But like, where does that influence come from? Is it some type of music? Is it some type of show or movie? Just like what draws that influence for you?
So the whole thing is based around this concept of liminal space, and I'm sure have you heard about that?
No, we can go
No.
into detail with that.
So basically, it's kind of hard to describe, but it's basically a space or like a room or environment that's kind of just like nostalgic, but like empty. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So people take pictures of like a abandoned like movie theater, right? Like there once was a bunch of people roaming this area and watching movies and stuff, and now it's abandoned. It's empty, and that's kind of just that's the best way I guess I could describe it.
Is that like what I guess like it's just interesting to see like the types of videos and like how do you like always do you base it always on stuff like that? Like how like
No, so that's what it was in the beginning.
Mhm.
There's this big thing called the back rooms, and that's kind of what led into it.
What's that?
It's it's really in depth, but so it's basically just liminal space, and it's like a fan made version of it. It's like a whole like environment, um, and it kind of just stems from that. But in the beginning, that's what I was doing, a liminal space, and now it's kind of just like if I have like a room in my a dream or something, I'll wake up, I'll just write it down in my notes and describe it, right, and I'll recreate it. So it's cool to like bring stuff like that to life, and create my own environments. You know what I mean?
That's actually really cool. It's
Yeah.
like, do you have like vivid dreams like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
often?
Oh yeah. Every single night. Every single night, I can see them. Like I have like these lucid dreams where it feels like they're real. You know what I mean? And so like as soon as I wake up, I'll go in my notes, I'll write down what I, experienced, and then, as best as I can, I'll recreate it. And
That
that's what a lot of my videos are.
that's so sick.
Yeah.
Like so like what you're saying is a lot of these videos, the inspiration is coming from your own
Yeah.
dreams,
Yeah.
basically. So that's really dope.
Yeah.
Like that's why like I was so excited to like talk and like ask these questions because
Hmm.
like I think one of the things that kind of is unfortunate with artists is they don't always get a chance to explain their work
Yeah.
because like as an artist you're kind of allowing the work to speak for you
Yeah.
almost. But as a podcaster, I like to know like the why and hear you talk about it. So it's
Hmm.
like nice to see the face behind the art, to hear the voice behind the art and
Yeah.
like where it actually comes from. I think that's super interesting. And like, did you have any fears or worries or doubts about creating the social media platform and being essentially you're coming into it as a content creator too? Like you have
Yeah.
to kind of enter that space, not only as an artist, but now with content.
Yeah, I really thought I'd get like a lot of backlash and like, like what even is this? Like what are you like why are you doing this? Um because, whenever you create social media content, you got to expect there's going to be some sort of hate, right? It always happens. Um but, as I've went on, I I haven't experienced any of that. which is, it's surprising. But the 3D community, like everyone is so positive with each other. Like everyone like is so supportive. They'll repost everyone's work. Like it's a really tight knit community, and I love that about it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the reposting aspects. I wanted to ask that too. Is like,
Yeah.
how do you feel about other people reposting stuff of like your content?
Yeah. So I mean, it depends. Like if people like shout me out for it, like if they'll give me credits, right? Okay, fine, right? You've took the time to credit me. Okay. But if you're like stealing my content, acting like it's yours, then it's like, okay, like that's when I have the problem with it. And just recently, there's a guy on TikTok and he would just steal all of my videos and just repost them, not credit my name or anything. And I actually got his videos taken down. I got three of them taken down, and um, yeah, I mean, I don't like when you don't credit me, even because I know my content's everywhere. I'll be scrolling through TikTok and it's just there. You know what I mean? Which is so weird, but yeah.
That's an interesting aspect, and because like it's cool stuff, so people do want to reshare. But the negative aspect is like, are they using it to bolster or boost their own page and boost
Exactly,
their?
and that's what was happening. I'm sure he was making profit. He had a million followers on TikTok, um, and it's like if you're making profit off something that I spent hours and hours making, and I don't even make profit. I post them on my social media. I make profit in other ways, but just my posts on Instagram, I don't make any money from that. So
Yeah, that's definitely like frustrating as a
it
content
is,
creator to
yeah.
watch someone, especially at that level. Like you know better. Like if you've been doing it for enough that period to have that following, you know exactly what you're doing, and that means there's a probably high chance a lot of his content is taken from other places, and like
Hmm.
I can imagine it probably is, which is like annoying that that kind of space is opened up for creators like that to like
Hmm.
steal other people's content because and that's the difficult thing that I could see about that type of art versus something like music where there's so many different laws and regulations about that and I don't know if there's any stuff about like digital art like that right now.
Yeah. So I mean, I was able to get them down. But yeah, I don't think there's because I know for music, like it's pretty easy to get stuff like copyright claimed and all that. But yeah, I haven't. I mean, I've talked to a bunch of guys, bigger guys in my space that help me out with that because they've dealt with it themselves. Um, but yeah, there's not a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, and you talked about this community like is it like a group chat? Is there like a Reddit? Like is there like a
It's
space? Like
it's
how do you find these
It's
people?
weird because so when I say community, it's a bunch of the 3D artists that like create similar content to me, right? Liminal space is kind of just a subject, but there's so many different ways you can, portray it, right? And so it's just like I think it just happens over time. Like once there's a new creator that comes into space, everyone will kind of find out about it because it's not a huge community, but it's small enough to where everyone knows each other, right? So I think that's a cool aspect about it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of because like I've seen the ones that are like with like the Pokemon and stuff. Have you seen those ones where it's like these like animated? It's like obviously the Pokemon, but they made it almost like real life
Oh, I think
looking.
so. Yeah, yeah,
And like I've seen them really on TikTok is where I've seen them,
yeah. Mhm.
and like that's where I start to wonder is like, do you know if like that is a possible issue as like a creator is like using stuff that's already like real, like a real creation.
Mhm.
Like, are you allowed to do that? Do you do that? Like, is that like
Okay.
okay?
So for my art, I know a lot of people in my space do. There's these things. You can go on websites. You can download assets of things, right? And you can just throw that in your work. And I don't like. There's people that will do that in their whole art, right? Like they will have it's only assets, right? They didn't make anything themselves except for the lighting, probably. Which it's just to me that's not art. Like putting things that other people made together, that's not art. And so for me, I personally make everything. Like I will model, texture everything by myself. So I don't run into that issue.
That's good. That's good. And like, how long does it usually take you to like create something that you like
Um,
post on like Instagram?
so like if it's just like a render, probably a couple hours. But the whole rendering process takes the majority of the time. Like a video, like a couple hours, like 2 to 3 hours, right? but the render could probably go up to 30 hours. So it'll just be rendering on my PC frame by frame for 30 hours. And I'll have to pray and hope that it's the way I wanted it. And if it's not, redo it. That's how it is.
Damn, that's so
So
frustrating. And
yeah.
like, I already know, just like even doing like the cameras and stuff, like this stuff always bugs me. And like, I
Yeah.
hate like the visual aspect and just like downloading videos,
Mhm.
making sure the videos are good. I had, a few weeks ago, I had an issue with my new camera, where I didn't realize the SD cards and like the speeds matter and like how much it could like process and like download and I don't know.
Oh
It's
yeah.
like I didn't know. I don't know. I'm not a camera guy. Like
Mhm.
I just kind of just do it. And I bought like this SD card that was like I think it was like 250 gigabytes and
Mhm.
like I was like, all right, cool, just a ton of space because like my videos take up a decent amount of space, and I was
Mhm.
trying to do 4K, which I don't do that anymore because
Oh
it
yeah.
takes up way too much space.
Mhm.
But apparently the camera that I'm using right now um, is more powerful than that SD card could handle.
Oh, okay,
So
yeah.
it recorded, so everything recorded looks like it's fine, and then I go to download the video, and it's like video can't be played.
Oh,
Video can't be played. I'm like
that is so frustrating.
shocked, and I'm
Yeah.
like, and like you guys, if you watch the podcast, you know what episode it was. Luckily, I have this camera recording, but
Oh yeah.
unfortunately, it only records the guests, so it literally just shows the guests. So if I was talking, it's just them not talking,
Mhm.
just for the visuals at least, which
Yeah.
kind of sucks. But like as a content creator and like as an artist, how do you overcome those moments where like you have like a bad like the video doesn't render properly or like the quality isn't what you want or your design's not exactly like coming to like your dream vision of what it could be.
Yeah, so most of the time, so I like to get things like I have a certain vision before I make anything. I have a certain vision of like what I want it to look like, and I try and get it to that as like accurately as I can, right? So say I render a 30-hour render, it's not the right, resolution or whatever. I'll just redo it. I'll redo it and I'll probably redo it like 3 or 4 times. Um and I'll just keep adding stuff. And I've never had a time where I regret redoing it because it always becomes better. Every single time I redo it and add something. Because like there'll be times where I'll look at the render, I'll be like, oh, like I could have added this, I could have added that. So I'll go back and do that. You know what I mean? So it is frustrating, but like it also gives me that different perspective. You know what I mean?
Yeah, do you ever struggle with like are you like a perfectionist in any way? It's like do
Eh,
you struggle with
a
that at
little bit,
all?
a
Or
little bit.
do you allow yourself to just do you allow the imperfections to like flow with the creativity and like kind of like be itself? Cause like I've struggled with that in my podcast is where like early on I was so like strict and like I gotta get the sound right, I gotta get the visuals looking right. And then at a certain point I was like, dude, just post it. Like
I
who
know.
cares?
Yeah.
So it's like, do you ever run into that within your own content
Oh,
too?
for sure. Yeah. Like especially I think that it plays the biggest part with lighting. Like lighting a scene, you can light a scene in so many different ways. And it's just like if you get it in a certain way, it could change the entire thing, right? So that's what I'll be playing with the most. But other than that, I'll kind of just leave the imperfections.
Yeah, I think any creator is gonna relate to the lighting
Yeah,
aspect, and that's
yeah.
something I've learned is, like, how important the lights
Even
were.
here, yeah.
Like, photographers, all of it,
Hmm.
like, that's something that people don't realize how important the lighting is, whether it's, like, if I just had, like, the actual light or if I did a podcast outside, natural light, how that would affect it,
Hmm.
how it would look,
Yeah,
like,
warmer lights, colder lights,
there's
it
so
all,
much that goes
it
into it that
all
people
comes into
don't
play.
really, like, truly, like, appreciate and
Hmm.
understand is, like and as someone who creates something I definitely appreciate the amount of time that it goes into something. So, like, when I'm talking to someone like yourself that puts in way more time than I do into his art,
Yeah.
like I can respect that and I can actually like admire that, and I think that's really dope. Like, where do you pull the motivation and like to like continue to keep doing it?
Um, I mean, it's cool. I think it's because of like the platform I have right now. I didn't realize until recently, like I have such a large impact on like artists, and like there will be people DMing me every day, like not every day, but like all the time, and say like, oh, you've inspired me to start creating art. You've inspired me to um, you know, do this and that, right? And that's what drives me because like I said in the beginning, that wasn't my intent. Like my intent wasn't to, have this big platform and, have this influence, right? And having that now is just like it's so cool to me. Like I have some effect on someone else. Like it's cool. It's really cool.
Yeah, and I think when you have a following like that,
Hmm.
and then you have that mindset,
Yeah.
I think the possibilities are endless for you. And when I saw the page, obviously I was like, wow, this is like you got a lot of followers. And
Yeah.
I'm like, and then to hear you talk about these things, I'm like, bro, you're gonna go so far with this, and like you're at such a young age where you're allowing yourself to learn.
Hmm.
And I think not enough people, and especially when you get success kind of like that, especially on social media,
Yeah.
people would, and you see it all the time where they allow their ego to kind of step in and like, oh, I'm the shit now. Like this is like,
Yeah. And I try not to do that, but that's definitely what comes with it.
yeah, and obviously there's a certain aspect, and we talked off podcast about the
Hmm.
attention aspect, and like I talked a little bit about like for you guys know my TikTok and how I've talked about that, and like there is a certain ego stroke to it that is there that people
I
don't like to
I
acknowledge.
think definitely when I first started blowing up, it was definitely there. Like seeing my first couple of videos like hit like 100,000 views, like and get all these comments. It's so cool. Like it's like I would refresh it and there would be like 1,000 more views. I just keep doing it, right? And I don't do that anymore because all my videos are hitting the same amount of views basically. But it's just like it's such a dopamine rush, and even like scrolling through TikTok, like that is something I need to work on. But you know, it's just I don't know.
Did you have to learn more about social media when you started posting? Because like obviously as an
Um,
artist, like you worry about the art, but like now that you've kind of created a platform for yourself, do you pay more attention to the social media stuff?
yeah, like I look at my analytics, I from time to time, I make sure like I post at certain times to make sure, um, the engagement is the same, and but I mean, I've always had like a good grasp on social media. Um, I used to use TikTok, and I used to like put out music, so I'd publish,
I used to do music too. You're
yeah.
opening up a whole new can of
Oh,
worms here.
yeah, like so this is the thing, like I just I feel like I was put here to create, and I've tried all the different outlets, right? I've tried music, I've tried, digital art, I've tried, drawing, painting, just to see what I'm good at, you know what I mean? So, um, obviously the music, it didn't really go as planned, but it was still fun to do. Like creating music and using your creativity to create something, it's just I love that. It's just that's what I love doing.
I agree, and I that's like my favorite thing about this podcast is I get to hear someone talk about being creative.
Yeah.
I think no matter what people do, whether it is like just a career that like an actual career or their like actual creative endeavor, like and then they make it into a career,
Hmm.
it's cool to hear people talk about the shit that they're passionate about because you see too much on social media where people are just talking about shit that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like talking about drama, talking about this, talking about that. It's like let's talk about some real shit. Let's talk
Hmm.
about like you as a person. Let's talk about why you do what you do. Let's talk about why you create art. What goes into the art? Like the fact that like some of your dreams inspire some of your art.
Yeah.
That's dope. Like that's the shit that we should talk about.
Hmm.
Not fucking like what did so and so do on that TV show
Yeah.
or
That
like
stuff. I try not to go deep into that stuff on social media, but
so negative, and it's
yeah.
just like that's where, and I was talking on episode last week with Josh on episode 133,
Hmm.
how people compare so much with social media
Oh
and how
yeah,
that
for sure.
becomes negative. Do you ever find yourself early on, like I can imagine probably the art probably took off pretty quickly, but um did you ever like struggle with like comparing to other artists? Like
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I thought like, if I wanted to be good at this, I need to like the big accounts, right? The big accounts with like hundreds of thousands of followers. I would compare myself to them because it's like they clearly did something right. If they have this amount of following, if they have people interested in this, they must be doing something right, right? And so I would, take influence from each of them. But for sure, man. Yeah.
do you ever collab with any other artists when you're creating this stuff, or is it strictly like
Um
your own process?
I haven't actually I did one collab, but it's not really known. Like I didn't post it or anything. But for sure, I do want to like dive into that soon. And a lot of the artists in my community actually do collab. Like that's a big thing that they do. But for sure, yeah, I'm very open to that.
Is it easy in that space? Like, I don't know how like digital art works. Are you able to like work at stuff at the same time?
Not really. You'd kind of just send like a file over, and then they would put their stuff into it. They'd work on it. It's
That'd be
kind of like
really
a back
cool.
and forth kind of
I
thing.
mean, this is kind of, I guess, like another one of your first chances to collab because
Yeah,
we're creating some art here in a
exactly. Yeah.
sense. So, and like, I was glad that you were willing to like come on a podcast and talk. So I do
Hmm.
know that there is a stereotype with artists not wanting to talk, and
For
that's
sure, man.
they're talking through their art.
Hmm.
So to like actually like you were like so down for, it, and I was like super excited because like I never
Yeah.
know how people react to getting the invitation.
Yeah, and it's like my page is like not about me personally at all. Like it's just the art. Like not like no one watching this who's from my page knows really who I am at all. So this is kind of a chance for them to know me as a person, and why I do it.
Yeah, and
So I think that's cool.
I think that's super important too. And like
Yeah.
I think like you're a dope person, and like they deserve to have a chance to like listen to the whys and to like to how and
Hmm.
to actually kind of dive in, and even for maybe family and friends that are like interested that like don't know you super like personally to like kind of like peek through and like dive in and see, oh, so that's why he does it that way, and like
Exactly. Yeah.
it explains a lot for me too, because like I'm also learning about you as we're having a conversation, which
Hmm.
is like I'm like I remember one of like my first episodes, one of my buddies was like, describe me as like an investigator, and I'm like that's kind of true. It's like I'm like an investigative like interviewer, but like also weird therapist at the same time. It's like where I'm trying to like create like a like I mentioned off pod, like a Joe Rogan therapy session
Yeah.
almost, where it's like it's a conversation, but it's also like talking about real stuff and like the whys and like the feelings behind it, and like and I mentioned it we talked a little bit about like earlier in the podcast, but like kind of want to like talk a little bit about like the mental health aspect and like how like this is like your outlet basically, and
Hmm.
like has it kind is it kind of like your way to like meditate, or is it your way to kind of like process emotions or anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. Like, it's kind of just calming to make like the stuff too. It's like that's why I like it so much. I'll literally just throw on music, and kind of just create. You know what I mean? Like, I'll do commissions for people, and say if they're like an artist, they make music, right? I'll do like an album cover. I just did one for Sue's Garage Band. So,
Shout out them.
yeah.
Shout out Sue's
So,
Garage.
and I didn't
The
tell them
boys.
this, but whenever I do stuff for like an artist that makes music, I will literally just put their music on and just try and soak it all in so I can kind of, see what they're seeing in a sense, right? And kind of just make the art portraying from, the music.
Now that's dope. Like
So,
that's a cool thing to like actually
and I
do.
think that's the best way to do it. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, before Sue's Garage, I, not to hate, I wasn't listening to their music all the time, but I put on the whole album, the whole EP they made, like everything, and I was just listening to the whole thing.
It was solid.
It
Like
was, it
because like
was.
that's when I heard some of the early stuff and then they dropped that. I was like, and that's what I told him too. Is like I really like the music and like
It's
the
good.
direction that you guys are going in, and like I'm not even just saying it because I interviewed them. Like I'm not
Mhm.
trying to just blow smoke up people's ass for no reason.
Yeah,
Like no, like you could see a clear progression in the music and like the talents, and like they're working on the craft, and
yeah.
like that's what's dope. Is like we're all kind of in this space of trying to create something, and like I'm like trying to create a place where people can come and just talk about it,
Yeah.
like while they're in the process, and
Mhm.
like who knows in 5-10 years where everything's at, and like I think that's the coolest part about recording a podcast and
For
like
sure,
kind of
yeah.
like encapsulating like a piece of time and a real conversation. And for me, I always kind of like refer to my second episode with my grandfather, who
Mhm.
since passed, to like have that episode. And it's always a reminder like how valuable these conversations are. Like obviously knock on wood, I hope everyone that's been on this podcast stays alive for as long as possible.
Exactly.
But to be able to share their story a little bit and like kind of get it out there and like have that kind of as long as the internet's always here
Mhm.
forever.
Yep.
And that's like the coolest thing in the world, and that's what keeps me going. So it's like it's nice to like have a conversation when this is our
Mhm.
first time meeting to
Yeah.
like dive into this stuff. And I think that's like it's really dope. And we're getting towards like the back end of the conversation. But is there anything that you want to say or you want to like kind of talk about before I get to like my like a wrap up question?
Um, No, I think we went
Yeah,
covered
I think
most
we
of it.
covered
Yeah.
like a lot of the stuff here, and this has been like a fantastic podcast. And like again, like I will tag all his art and stuff on Instagram and shit. And like you guys seriously need to go check this out. Like I'm not like someone that like avidly pushes stuff, but like when I saw his art, shit's it's just dope. Like as someone who I'm very big into social media and the
Yeah.
internet and stuff like that. So like when I see stuff like that, it's just different.
I think the coolest part of it is like the reason I love art so much is you don't have to be a certain person to enjoy it. Like everyone will probably look at my art and see a different version of it. You know what I mean? So like you know nothing about it, but you still like it and you still think it's cool. And I think that's the best part about it. You know?
Yeah, 100%. And like I think that's the greatest way to look at it is like everyone gets something different from it. And like
Exactly.
you're allowing your audience to interpret it how they want to.
Yeah.
I think that's really
I
cool.
think it's cool because like I'll go through my comments and like all of them are different, like about different parts of it that I didn't even notice. You know what I mean? So it's just cool. Everyone sees things differently, and yeah,
It's good that you're receptive to the comments too and to
yeah,
like read and listen and like look. And obviously you're not taking them so much in. Like I could tell that like you kind of like read them, but you don't take them too personally.
exactly.
You don't
Yeah.
allow it to like change your art in any negative way, which is cool. Um, Coming towards the end, so I got that one last question for you. So, what would your advice be for someone who wants to pursue their passion?
Hmm. I think which this worked for me, but I think the best way is making connections with people. I think it's so important, especially people that are in your field and like have a lot more knowledge than you do. Just making connections is so important. And I'll kind of say my example and what happened with me, right? Um, when I first started, I want to get feedback from people with like 100,000 followers, the people that have been doing it for a while, but in the 3D space. And so I would DM like 10 people, right? And only like two of them answered, but they would give me feedback. They would post my stuff on their story, which kind of helped blow me up. And I think that like having that connection, that friendship with someone in your space is so beneficial. And it's cool because now that I have a platform, people are doing that to me. Like when I first started, I was reaching out to these big guys and they were giving me advice. And now the smaller creators are, reaching out to me and I'll help them out. I'll, post their stuff on my story. And I think yeah, that's it. That's the advice I would give.
I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
Hence, Carroll
Oh
connection
yeah.
right there.
Oh wow.
Did it without like
Yeah, that was planned. I knew that.
yeah. always figuring out a way to
Yeah.
kind of to tie everything back together.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
man, I really appreciate you for coming on this podcast. It's been fantastic to
Yeah,
get to know
man.
you and just like hear why you do what you do.
This is cool, man.
Appreciate it, and hopefully we can do it again and
For
catch up
sure.
and like dive into some more stuff as you continue to progress with your art.
For sure, man.
For you guys on the podcast, if you guys like the podcast, please rate, review, subscribe, share with your friends, share with your family, share with your grandma. You can check it out, thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you'd like to watch your podcast, check it out on YouTube at The Carroll Connection or at Jared M. Carroll. And if you want to be a guest or return as a guest, hit me up on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll or at The Carroll Connection. But till next time, guys, peace.